everyone. I'm Abigail. This is James, and welcome to another Two Kids interview.
We are joined today by Newbery honor author
Veera Hiranandani. Ms. Hiranandani's books include the middle grade novels, The Whole Story of Half a Girl, How to Find What You Are Not Looking For,
Phoebe G. Green's chapter book series,
and of course, the Newbery honor book, The Night Diary.
And on January 23rd, 2024, she will be coming out with a companion novel to The Night Diary, Emil and the After.
And in April, she has a story in the anthology, The Door is Open.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me in that lovely intro.
First, we want to wish you a happy Diwali.
Thank you.
And there's more representation in books now than ever before.
You and your books are a part of that. Is that something that's important to you?
Very much so. And so, I come from two different cultures and backgrounds and religions. My mother is Jewish and my father was born in India and came here, met my mom, and he's Hindu. And I grew up in Connecticut. So I didn't see a lot of people that kind of had my same background or did, sort of celebrated things. There weren't a lot of Jewish people in my town. There weren't a lot of Hindu people in my town. And nobody was both. And so for me, it was really exciting to of course, I connected to all kinds of characters and stories, but it was really exciting when I would see somebody who was, closer to my background. And so that's why I like to write books where it is about my background, and kids who relate to part of it or all of it can find those connections in my books.
Your first book, The Whole Story of Half a Girl, the main character is half Indian and half Jewish, like you. Is it important to write a book for yourself if you want others to connect to it?
Absolutely. And you don't necessarily have to write exactly about yourself or your background. Sometimes people are writing science fiction or fantasy, but I do think it's important to put a real part of yourself in your stories and in your characters and connect to the real emotions you had and the real experiences you had, and then put them into your characters. So when your characters are experiencing those things, it's coming from a real place. And then when the person who reads it, they'll connect to that sort of specific feeling that you were writing about as the writer, in just a more three-dimensional way, in a more real way.
Do you have any family practices that combined Hindu and Jewish traditions?
That's a good question. Not really, except for food sometimes, and especially in my family, I can kind of mix and match flavors and experiment with things, or put a little cardamom in the kugel, and see how that tastes. And so I sometimes mix and match with the food traditions. But we didn't really mix holidays. It was more just like celebrating all of them.
The representation you have included in your books isn't only race and religion. It's also people who learn differently. Your book, How to Find What You're Not Looking For's main character has dysgraphia.
We don't think there is enough representation of different learners in books, and definitely not when they are the main character. Is that something you will try to continue to include in future books?
Absolutely. I think I was a different learner growing up. I wasn't, growing up in the 80s. I don't think there was an awareness of different specific things that might have helped. I needed my handwriting was kind of messy, and I didn't hold my pencil properly, and I had to wear this brace for my pencil. And then when I started typing on an electric typewriter, I could type really fast, and that helped me sort of write as fast as I was thinking, and it helped me express myself in a better way. And some other people in my family also have learning differences. And so I just think the more awareness we can have about not just always thinking of it as a disability, but it's a difference. And there can be different ways in classrooms and teachers helping people learn in all kinds of ways. And I wish I had more of that growing up, and I want my kids, my family to have that as well. So it's important for me to write characters that are experiencing that, and for readers to open their minds to all kinds of things or see themselves in those books.
Before we get to our next question, I was wondering if you watched the Disney Plus show Ms. Marvel.
Well, I do know, I don't watch the whole show, but I watched the part where the partition is mentioned. I know it's probably taking place on a few shows, but that's exciting that the partition has a part in that story.
How did you think the show did with how they presented partition?
I can't really answer that because I just really saw like a bunch of clips, so I didn't really watch it that carefully. I hear from other people that they did a great job, and I think a lot of people were really, it meant a lot to a lot of people to see their family history in a big commercial show because it's so rare.
You write a lot of historical fiction. Can you tell us about the research that goes into all of those books?
It's a lot of research. And it's funny, when I wasn't that great a history student growing up, I had trouble sort of memorizing names and dates and just, taking a test on that information. I needed stories to connect with those names and dates. And so for me, I really look into the history that I'm connected to with my family. And so I start there and I look at I talk to my parents and I talk to my aunts and uncles and I ask them about my grandparents, and I start looking through just old letters and documents, and I kind of start in a very personal place. And then as I figure out more about the kind of story I want to tell, then I start to look at newspapers and books and documentaries to fill in the blanks of the information that I don't know. But I kind of, I don't do it all at once. I sort of do some research and then start writing, and then I hit a block and I think, oh, I've got to figure out more here or find out more about what happened here. And then I go back into the research.
What is the most meaningful interaction you've had when you're talking to a student during a school visit?
Well, I've had a lot of meaningful reactions, and the Q&A is always my favorite part because that's when I really am talking to students and my readers. And so that's always really exciting for me. I have had students talking about, like, specifically with the Night Diary. There are people that said, I've read this book with my mother or my father and my grandparents, and my grandparents, were in the partition, experienced the partition, and it's sort of 3 generations that are now able to talk about this history because they have my book as kind of a vehicle, and all 3 generations are reading the book together. And so I've heard that from some students, and I see how meaningful it was. And anybody who just comes and says, yeah, that's a food I eat in my family, or that's something that happened in my family, that really means a lot to me.
You have written books with important topics like racism. Is it hard to write about that and still make sure the book is uplifting by the end?
Yes. The answer is yes, it is really hard. And I do write many drafts just to try to get the essence of what I'm saying personally about kind of how I feel and how the characters feel, to sort of try to end on a hopeful note. My stories are sort of these wishes I'm sending out where, yes, we have these problems, and yes, we have problems of conflicts between race and religion and all of the things that have been going on in our world and continue to go on in our world. And so I just feel like my wish is that we can figure out these things and understand the humanity underneath everything. And that's kind of the story I create, in kind of hopes that that's the way the world will be someday.
You write both middle grade and chapter books. What is the most challenging thing, and what do you enjoy the most about each?
Well, I love middle grade. There's something about, sort of an 11 or 12-year-old character and writing for kids who are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever the range is. I remembered a lot growing when I was that age. And so I think those memories are still really fresh, and it's not that hard for me to sort of become an 11 or 12-year-old. It's actually a little harder for me to become, like, in my mind, maybe a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old or older, an older teenager. So I think middle grade is easier for me. the Phoebe G. Green books were really fun to write, but really hard because I was trying to be funny in them. I was trying to be funnier than I am in my middle grade, and being funny and actually making people laugh is very difficult. So that was very challenging.
What is your process when putting a book together?
Do you decide the end before the middle?
Or do you put it together in order?
Good question. I tend to have a loose idea in my mind before I start of maybe kind of the beginning, middle, and end, just like a really loose idea of where it all might be going. And then I just write and kind of get inspired and write until I hit a wall and I'm not sure where I'm going. And then I start to plan more and outline more, and then I go back into my writing. But I write pretty linearly. Some people write like in all kinds of patchwork ways where they have an idea and they start in the middle and then they write the end and then they write the beginning and then they put it all together. But I kind of write, in a straight line that way. But I revise a lot, but I write that way.
We have interviewed a number of authors who've had books banned.
That means in those places, kids don't have the same access to books that we may have and may not be able to see themselves represented in books.
Can you give us your feelings on this?
Well, it makes me very sad. I really think that banning books is kind of like banning people. And so if you ban a book like The Night Diary, and The Night Diary is banned in some places in Florida, you're saying to kids that they either shouldn't know about this history, or if they have a South Asian background, that somehow they're not supposed to read a book about people like them. And I really don't understand why we would be wanting to teach kids that or create a world like that. The more we can understand each other's cultures and each other's perspectives, the better the world will be. And I just, I don't see why anybody would disagree with that. But so we'll just keep fighting.
Our school actually has intercultural night this year. It's this Saturday.
Wonderful. And so how does that work?
A bunch of people like either do the fashion show or the talent show or just cook on the side so people can get food. My brother up there he's singing Hashki Venu, and I'm cooking either latkes or matzo ball soup.
And I'm doing the fashion show.
Awesome. I love that. Well, that makes me happy. So thank you.
Rejection is a part of most writers' stories. Can you tell us about that part of your journey?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a hard thing because you put your heart and soul in your writing, and then if you send it out, and it's happened to me where I send it out and the editor will say, this isn't quite what we're looking for, or we have another similar book like this, or, we really like it, but we just can't take on a new book right now. Or you just don't hear anything, and maybe it's just that they didn't like it. You don't really know. And so all of those things have happened to me. But when you send out your work, all you need is one yes. You need one editor that connects to your work and says yes. So that's why you keep sending it out. And the more you do it, the more you kind of get used to it and not take it so personally. I think it's harder almost when you're a newer writer or a younger writer and a teacher is maybe too critical or almost acting like an editor rejecting your work. And I feel like teachers should really be encouraging as much creativity and play in that area as possible. And I think I was pretty lucky that I had teachers that just encouraged me. I don't really remember getting a lot of critique on my creative writing. I had plenty of critique some of my other work, but my creative writing was just sort of like, oh, wow, this is an interesting story. Keep going. And I think that's most of what young writers really need to hear. Maybe a part that they did really well, but just to keep writing and playing, that's how you learn. So.
Can you tell us exactly where you were and your reaction when you found out you were a Newbery honor author?
It was so exciting. So you in the publishing world, everybody knows that if you're going to win, they will call you in the morning during the American Library Association conference. And you don't want to wait for it because it just feels like, no, there's no way that I would win. And so I don't even really want to be aware of it, but I can't unknow what I know. And I know that that is happening right now. And I think because the Night Diary, there were people that were really excited about it. And there were people that were doing, mock Newbery contests. So I was paying attention a little more, but I didn't think my phone would ring, but then it did. And I was in my living room. I was actually eating brownies to try to distract myself from not getting a call, which is what I thought would happen. And it was an incredibly exciting moment and made me feel very proud.
Can you tell us your thoughts and if you are at all concerned about artificial intelligence and its future impact on publishing?
Yes, I am concerned. I think we all don't quite know what is going to happen. I think any new technology can be used as a tool to kind of help us. I think I used AI when I was organizing my glossary for my new book. So I had all these words and definitions, and it was kind of all over the place. And I was able to kind of dump it in AI and get it all alphabetized and just really quickly, almost like I had an assistant. And that was great. But I would never use AI to write my books because I get so much out of the process of kind of figuring out my story and doing my research and thinking it through. That gives so much to me as a person who cares about writing and cares about the subject. So if I could just put a few prompts in and press a button and get the same story, that would be taking something away from me. So I hope we use it more as a tool to help us rather than to replace our work, our important work. We'll see.
Can you tell us a little bit about your story in the anthology, The Door is Open? And did you have any interaction with other authors?
Yes. So the way that works is when you get asked to do an anthology, which is really fun for me. I love being able to write short stories for an anthology, and I've done a few of them. There's actually a new one coming out called On All Other Nights, and it's a Passover anthology that's coming out in March. So I have that one out too, or coming out soon too. And so the editor, who often it's people that you've kind of other authors that you've met at conferences, and then they reach out to the authors they know that might be good for their topic. And they say, I'm pitching an anthology to an agent, and this is a subject, or we have an idea and we'd like you to come aboard and write a story about this topic. And then you're usually all on like an email group. And maybe you know some of the authors, maybe you don't. And then you submit your story, and then you eventually see everybody's stories and you get to read everybody's stories. So it's mostly kind of an email thing. You don't work in person with people because, technology. But everybody's kind of part of the growing of the anthology.
I didn't know about the Passover one. I'm pre-ordering that one today.
Awesome.
What writer has had the most influence on you?
Oh, wow. I don't think there's a single writer. I grew up reading a lot of the classics by like E.B. White and Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume. And and Sydney Taylor. I read all of the Kind Family books and I love them. And so I was really just taking bits and pieces. And then as I grew up, and mostly in high school and college, I read adult books. And so, I just have influences by so many different authors at different times in my life. It's hard for me to say one.
What advice do you have for young writers?
I think it is about giving yourself that freedom, to just try things and not really worry if they're good or not. Maybe you just write something and then it is what you hoped it would be, or if it's not, you'll try again, or you'll write poetry and then you'll write a short story and then you'll write a play. And really just, I did all of that. And just to try those things to, I think a lot of times, I have kids, and a lot of times you're aware of like contests and things online and maybe more pressure to kind of be a published writer even earlier. And I'm glad that I didn't even think of that until college. It just gave me a chance to experiment.
Can you tell us about a project you are working on now?
Sure. Well, I have my first picture books coming out next fall and then the following spring, I think. And so it was really exciting to work on picture book manuscripts, because I had been writing picture book manuscripts for years and years and years. Every time I wrote one, I was like, I don't know if I'm really getting it, or if this is the story I want to be my first picture book. And so I finally figured out a couple of stories that I wanted to tell, and then I had to do many, many revisions, because you only have about 500 or 600 words that you're working with for a picture book, and you also want to leave space for the illustrator to do the pictures. So that was a different way of writing for me, but I'm really excited to have them out there, and then I get to see my words illustrated by these incredible illustrators.
Finally, it's time for Turbo 10.
10 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I don't know. I'll try to be.
Number 1, what is your favorite phrase to use?
My favorite phrase? Lately I've been using the phrase "you do you."
Number 2, what is one subject you'd love to learn more about?
Oh my gosh, so many subjects. I don't know. I've been thinking more about the environment and kind of connecting to nature. So just like more environment, scientific stuff, I guess.
Number 3, what's your go-to snack food?
Oh, my go-to snack food is usually nuts and chocolate. I eat that's often my snack.
Sorry. Number 4, what is your favorite book growing up?
My favorite book. I have to say Charlotte's Web is just one of my all-time favorite books.
Number 5, if you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
If I could go somewhere right now?
Teleport.
Oh my gosh, like to a different place in time? Or just somewhere else?
Place.
Just a place. I don't know. I've been thinking about just being on the edge of the sea somewhere, on the edge of the ocean, somewhere beautiful on the ocean. That could be a lot of different places. So maybe
Number 6, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
What would it be?
I think the one superpower, I was always debating whether I could fly. I wanted to fly or be invisible, and it's still a toss-up. I don't know.
I actually created a cross between those two. Invisiflying, which you can fly, but you can only fly when you're invisible, and you can only be invisible when you're flying.
That sounds perfect. So that's mine too.
Number 7, what was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
Oh, my sister and I used to watch Tom and Jerry all the time. And when I watch it right now, it's like really kind of violent and strange, but I don't know. We just loved it when we were kids. We thought it was so funny.
Number 8, what is your favorite rainy day activity?
Reading, I must say. I know that's kind of a classic for a writer, but it is. It is.
Number 9, if you could have any 3 dinner guests, who would they be?
Oh gosh. I don't know. Jane Austen. I don't know. Do you know who Jane Austen is? She's a writer in the 19th century writer, and I love her books. So I think it would be pretty interesting. I think Gandhi would be a pretty interesting dinner guest. And then maybe somebody modern and living. I have a favorite Indian author, Jhumpa Lahiri, who I've never actually met, but I have 2 favorite South Asian authors, Mohsin Hamid and Jhumpa Lahiri, and they're my 2 favorite South Asian authors, and I would love to meet them, and hopefully I'll meet them someday. So I said 4.
Number 10, what is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Just try to be a good person. Just care about other people as much as you can. And I think my parents really were, they're very kind people, and I try to be. So.
You were awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
And thank you so much for spending this time with us.
We can't wait to read your future books.
Thanks for having me. You guys were awesome too.